Welcome back, tribe, to Hustle and Thrive. I am Julian,
I am Shay.
and we are back again with another brilliant episode to help you maximize your fitness, health, and to redefine what fitness means to help you reclaim your fitness.
Yeah, right on. Today we're talking about fear and how to get over it, how to live harmoniously with it. I like that word. I heard you use it today.
Harmoniously.
Harmoniously.
Fear, anxiety, and just getting outside of your comfort zone. There's a lot of people who deal with it on a day-to-day basis, and it decreases their fitness. It's not helpful.
It's not always the fit thing to do.
And then there are those who use fear on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to improve their fitness, to get outside their comfort zone, and to thrive. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that: fear, anxiety, get inside your comfort zone, and how all of those things factor into your fitness. Shay, where would you like to start?
I would like to start by maybe pointing out that there is a difference between a rational fear
Okay.
and an irrational fear. An irrational fear could be something like, I'm really scared of lamps.
Right.
I don't know why that just came to mind. Maybe spiders would be a better option. But anyways, it's a fear of something that is it's not based in reality. It's just something that your brain has picked up on, decided to really, really, really not like. And it is on the lines of debilitating because it is so not founded in reality.
So are you thinking in the lines of like phobias or
Let's
even
say
more
phobias.
random
Let's
than
say
that?
phobias,
Okay,
yeah.
sure. So irrational fears, maybe even phobias. And then what would be an example of a rational fear?
A rational fear is something that legitimately is an issue, something you need to consider. If you are on a 3-story roof working on, fixing some shingles, falling to your death or to severe injury is something to be afraid of. And if it existed in a place where it was controlled and you knew what was going on and you took safety precautions, that is a good, healthy zone, and we like that zone. But if you are so shaky and so just unrealistic about what's going to happen up there that you can't get your job done, that
Right.
perhaps could exist in a zone that is unhealthy.
Okay. So I want to add another dimension to that since you bring that up. And what I'm thinking of is fear or even anxiety as being, instead of irrational or rational, because those are great points. But I'm also thinking as being proportionate or disproportionate.
Ooh, spicy. I like those words.
Right. So if if the amount of anxiety that you experience is proportionate to the actual threat or the actual stimuli, the actually thing you have to do or don't have to do, then it's adaptive. Then it's actually, I'd imagine, helping you cope with that situation to some extent.
Okay.
But if it's disproportionate, to kind of build off of the idea of it being rational or irrational. If it's disproportionate, then the less proportionate it is, the less helpful it is. And that can go both ways. So let's say that I'm deathly afraid of lamps. I have a phobia of lamps.
Lamps.
That sounds like something that could be a little bit disproportionate, and it might be maladaptive because anytime I walk into a room with a lamp, I freak out, and doesn't end well for myself or the lamp.
As most of us know, lamps are not that dangerous, so really any fear towards them is disproportionate.
Yeah, actually, if there's anyone that actually has a phobia of lamps, I apologize.
I'm going to look up lamp phobia. You keep talking, but I'm here.
I'm gonna keep riffing on this, but I didn't mean to offend anyone who has a lamp phobia. But it can also be disproportionate in the opposite direction.
Okay, do tell.
So if there is a threat that pops up, or something that's dangerous, or something where you need to be on, you need to be alert, aware, maybe even need a little bit of adrenaline to get through a situation, and your anxiety does not increase to meet that demand, you actually might be understimulated, and it's disproportionate because how you should react is actually less than how you're actually, or more than what you're actually reacting.
So you're saying they're not taking what the task at hand seriously enough, in a sense?
Right. So super easy example. Imagine I'm walking down the street we can make it a little more realistic. I'm walking down the street in Boulder, Colorado, and a bear jumps around the corner because every once in a while a bear wanders down from the mountain into Boulder.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
No, yeah. It definitely happens. I mean, not frequently, but enough that there are some viral videos of it taking place.
Jesus.
So a bear jumps around the corner. That sounds like a threat. That sounds like something that I would benefit from a little bit of fight or flight action. But if I just look at the bear and I have no reaction at all and I yawn and I'm unenthused, that's not doing me any favors in that situation. So even that reaction is disproportionate. You can have too much or too little anxiety or fear in a certain moment.
Right. One thing that comes to mind, and maybe I'm just ranting here,
Sure.
but a seemingly disproportionate fear to the risks of driving. Some people seem to think either they are completely invulnerable or that nothing bad is ever going to happen. But
Right.
I mean, I'd like to point out most of us are able to drive with a healthy level of fear, and that we are neither so numb to it that we're not just driving 130 miles an hour down the road. Some of us do. And
Sure.
we're also not so squeamish to the fact that we're driving that we're only driving 8 miles an hour down the road.
Right.
Most of us have a healthy, reasonable, proportionate relationship with the fear of
I
driving.
think that's a great example. And also why drinking and driving is not a good idea, because it can sometimes decrease that anxiety threshold.
It's called liquid courage.
It's called, and sometimes liquid stupidity.
Yeah.
In
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the right situations. So I think that's a good place to start, is kind of thinking about what are the parameters of anxiety and the experience of fear. That sometimes it can be helpful, sometimes it's not helpful at all, and that it can go both ways. That it can be the anxiety can be overwhelming and overproportionate, or it can be underwhelming and not meet the demands of what we're being faced with.
Cool. So maybe let's touch on some real fears that one or both of us might have. Do you have anything that you fear? What is your relationship with fear?
So as you say, that one thing really stands out.
Right.
And I have a fear of things that can both fly and sting. So I've developed a relationship with bumblebees. We're cool. But wasps and other fly stingy things, they freak me out. They're unpredictable. I don't know where they're coming from, what they're thinking. Are they gonna sting me or they're not? And it kind of goes back to an experience I had as a kid, where I was stung by a bee, and that wasn't cool, and that's stuck with me.
Can you relate that story, or is it too personal?
Oh, it's not personal. I was little. I was 5 or 6 or something, and I was being a trooper, and I was trying to help my mom by taking the trash out. Right, this adorable little version of myself.
He's still pretty adorable.
I'm still a little cute. A little rough around the edges now. And I'm pulling it out. My mom warns me. She's like don't go over to the corner of the street there. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it, because there was a bee's nest next to the mailbox. So of course I'm dragging it over there, and in my memory I can almost imagine the bee hovering up from next to the mailbox, turning to look at me, and then making a straight line towards me, and it stung me in the neck. And I think more than the pain of being stung, it was just the betrayal.
The betrayal
that I felt. I was just trying to do a nice thing and help be a little trooper, and this stupid bee stung me. And one would think that the moral of the story is to not do nice things to get stung by bees. And I think the combination of being stung and just recognizing that the world is not fair has stuck with me, and now I hate wasps.
Funny. So kind of a dissection of that is that flying, stinging things can be a problem. I mean, if you get stung by enough of them, or by the right one, they can really, really hurt you.
Especially if you have an allergy to them.
Yeah, especially if you have an allergy, for sure. But for the most part, it's not a huge looming threat in any of our lives of stinging, flying things, unless you live somewhere crazy. So we would call Julian's fear of fly stingers disproportionate. Now, do you have any healthy, proportionate relationship with fear? I know you are a high level college athlete, a D1 track runner.
Sure.
How was your relationship with the fear of either performing or doing well for your team? What did that look like for
Yeah,
you?
absolutely. I think so. I ran track and field, and fear is a little bit different. Anxiety is a little bit different in track because, especially when you're a sprinter, you will feel fear and you will feel anxiety, especially for hours before your race, and then your race, mine being the 400, might last less than a minute. Um, so I will spend 4 hours being anxious and having all this build up and all this anticipation for this race. And I think it's thinking about that nervousness is also on the flip side excitement. So when it came down to the final event of the day, the 4x4, and myself being the anchor, recognizing that I was both anxious, but that anxiety was made up of both nervousness and excitement. And by the time the baton got around the track with my other teammates running and got into my hand, I was primed and ready to perform at my best. Everything else just kind of blanked out, and I was so focused on just the task at hand. So there are some moments where 4 hours before the race, yeah, it might have felt a little disproportionate there, right? But as you are standing, waiting for the baton, or you are getting into the blocks, and all of that anticipation is building up to to an event that takes less than a minute, that's when it can all culminate. I think is that a decent enough example from what you're thinking?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it sounds like you were aware of the fear, you were aware of what could go wrong and go right, and you had a healthy relationship with it because you knew it was going to be scary, you were anticipating it, but
Right.
you also knew it would pass. Once you did your job, you wouldn't be thinking about it anymore. And to me, that sounds like a textbook example of a proportionate, healthy relationship with a fear.
Right, and especially with the 400, a lot of the fear was not necessarily the race itself. It was just like the pain of like lactic acid and that like final 100-meter stretch, especially. Thinking about those things, even to this day, imagining running a 400-meter dash, like I can feel my heart rate increase.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting a little sciencey here, but doesn't
Yeah.
the exertion duration of a 400-meter dash doesn't exist in between like two weird energy systems where it's just awful. Like you're not performing at like maximum like strength, but you're also not performing at like maximum like endurance, and it's just this awful, awful, awful in between where it's just terrible.
Right. So it's in all technicalities a sprint.
It's still a sprint?
It's still a sprint.
Okay.
It's a 400-meter dash. But there is a certain level of control to it. You can't all out sprint. I think when a lot of people think of sprinting, they don't kind of take into account a lot of the form that comes with sprinting. Even 100-meter dash runners, save a few, they have a certain cadence that seems relaxed, which when you're watching it on TV or something in the Olympics, it almost seems effortless. So we would come through the first 200 meters of a 400-meter dash at about the halfway point in 21 seconds and change. Now you might want to take the gas off a little bit so that you have something to give on the other end, but saying that we're moving. What happens is your body can't sustain that effort for the whole 400-meter dash, with the exception of a few of the highest level athletes and Olympians. So you end up around the 250, 300 mark, essentially like running out of gas, and you're trying to land a plane that has run out of gas, and that's what it feels like for the last 100 meters.
Oh, God. So what was your 400 time on average for some street cred here?
Oh, average? I averaged 47s, and I think by the time I got to my senior year, my fastest were in the 46s. And then splits in terms of the 4x4 were faster because you get a little bit of running start. But yeah, so just good enough to be good, just bad enough to not ever think of being a professional.
Funny.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, that's two relationships with fear that I think are good examples of what we're kind of talking about here.
For sure. And I guess passing the baton, so to speak,
Oh,
what is
funny.
what has been
Funny.
your experience maybe with fear, anxiety, and maybe how have you overcome some of those things?
So I'll start with something I would consider it's been a journey of developing a proportionate reaction to fear, and it
Okay.
is my sport. I do parkour,
A journey.
which to define it is the sport of moving efficiently and effectively through an environment,
Right.
much like in an obstacle course setting. So running and jumping and climbing and all kinds of good stuff. So when I begun the sport, I had a lot of disproportionate fears that looked like, oh my God, this is new. I'm definitely going to get hurt no matter what. Didn't matter the skill level.
Huh.
I just knew, quote unquote, that I was going to get hurt.
Right.
And as time has gone, that was the major limiter in my performance was I was too scared to do what my body was capable of. And I would say the last like 3 or 4 years have mostly been mental gains in a sense of becoming more aware of what I really can do, trusting what I can do, and just being more conscious of the whole journey in and of itself. And I've reached a much higher level than I did a couple years ago, simply just becoming better at dealing with my fears of this, that, and the other.
Right. So that process of almost going back to what we had started with, that process of gradually stretching and stepping outside of your comfort zone, help decrease your fears, but also help increase some of your skill level over time.
Yeah, and what Julian just said about stepping out of your comfort zone on purpose is super imperative. And if I could like give one piece of advice, it is to, on a frequent basis, do something that scares you. In a sport like parkour, that's super obvious. I can do a jump that's a little bit farther, or I can do a jump that's a little bit higher, or I can do it to a surface that's a little bit smaller. Super easy ways to very continuously and progressively push my comfort zone in a way that I can control.
Right.
But I would definitely try to tailor that to a day-to-day life. You may not be doing parkour, but I promise there's something that you could do that's, let's give it a 3 out of 10 on the scary level that you could do. And over time, if you did that every single day for a month, I bet you would be a little bit braver.
Right. And there are probably some very subtle ways that that fear introduces itself into our lives, or that we experience anxiety, that we wouldn't really say that, no, I'm not scared of that. Or no, I'm not, I don't have a fear or a phobia of that thing, but still in some ways limits us. And I'll give an example of something that I've been working with fairly recently, is intentionally making eye contact with strangers walking down the street. There's almost this like micro moment of like panic when you're walking down the street and you lift your eyes for a second, and like a stranger walking the other way also like meets eyes. Like you can't like undo that.
You can't.
So do I say hi? Do I like just put my eyes down? Do I like what do I do in this moment? And a lot of the times I know that those are just like little micro moments of fear. And of course you pass by them and that time passes. And I wouldn't say that I'm afraid of making eye contact or human contact. But now I'm like being very intentional about if I'm walking down the street and I make eye contact with someone, or even driving down the road or something like that, that I'll wave, or I'll say hi, or I'll smile, or I'll do something, and I won't be the one to break eye contact.
That's really cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, unless we've been looking at each other for like an unacceptable amount of time, and then about staring at someone. But I don't want to have to like avert my gaze, because in that moment I feel too awkward to look at another human, and that's just one way of me pushing myself out of my comfort zone as well.
That's awesome. Have you seen what have you seen that's turned over, and what does that become of you?
Well, I think just the process of trying that and experimenting with it is, you find that a lot of the reasons that I keep my eyes down, that my posture is slumped, that I felt awkward in those moments, was that I wasn't prepared. I didn't have a purpose. I didn't have a reason to chat, and I projected that onto other people, and imagined that they didn't have a reason or a desire or a purpose to talk to me, right? But now that I am going out of my way to say hi, you find that most people are friendly, they smile,
For sure. Yeah.
Even the ones that kind of like mean mugging a little bit, like you give them a smile and a wave, and they'll break on you. And then you do get the occasional person that like wants nothing to do with
Oh, for
your
sure.
existence. But
Yeah.
but you find that those instances are also not as potentially heartbreaking as you think they are.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to point out that a lot of times we're scared of something. If you just like regularly dose yourself with it, you'll find
Right.
it's really not as bad as we made it in our head, for sure.
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
And I know that you've talked in the past about that process of kind of dosing yourself with fear, and that's, even though we are talking about health and fitness, I think that is across the board in all domains. You have to do that in work settings. You have to do that in relationships. Whether you're when you're with a crush or a romantic or a love interest, we run into all these instances of both like micro and macro anxieties that we have to deal with.
For sure.
And in order to like create anything substantial or to succeed, that is a necessary component. I'm wondering if there are any other examples that stand out to you other than any of your parkour experience.
Any other examples? Yes. So I would say I actually had a pretty rough time throughout. Like I would go and say my high school and college years with pretty debilitating anxiety, and the premise of the anxiety wasn't anything groundbreaking. It was a little bit of social anxiety. It was a little bit of performance anxiety.
Sure.
It was a little bit of just I'm not good enough. Blah blah blah. And the main thing was that I let it cripple me. I let it live inside me, become something it wasn't, and I truly believed my fears. And it wasn't until I became kind of conscious of what was going on and made a very aware decision to, I've got to beat this, and no one's going to beat it but me. And what my life has looked like, again, for the last 2 to 3 years, has been purposely doing things that scare me a little bit. And these are proportionate to my fears. I probably struggle with social anxiety more than most people. So my proportionate fear is something that's not that big of a deal to most people. But for me, it was. And it was on a very regular basis, seeking out those little challenges that bothered me just enough to freak me out. But if I overcome them, would stimulate me in a way that made me just a little bit stronger on the other end.
Yeah.
And one little saying, I wish I could remember where I found this, but basically, I think it was Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Sure.
Or you can quote me on it, whatever. He said that you should use fear as a compass for where to go next. The way I see it is if you have fear in your life, that is what's stopping you from being free.
Yeah.
If something scares you, it's stopping you from living your life to the fullest.
Yeah, it's kind of a limiter. It's kind of holding you back.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should use fear as the direction you should go next. If you've got this looming fear of women or men, or you've got this looming fear of going to the gym, or this looming fear of this, that, and the other, and you know it's holding you back, it should be the compass. It should be the direction you are going. That is north. You go that way, you face it, and you will be better in the end. And that's been the last 2 to 3 years of my life, and it's been a great journey, and I cannot say it's easy, but I can say it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, and that's so difficult because in those times, especially when life throws a number of challenges at us, it's really easy to stay in our comfort zone and kind of justify it with, I got a lot of things going on right now. Like I'll worry about addressing that thing later. I'll worry about my personal and professional development and pushing myself later because I got a lot of these things I have to take care of. It's not easy. I won't sit here and say that it's easy to just make that decision. But it sounds like it took some courage to say, I am going to overcome this. And speaking on anxiety, it's one of the most prevalent, expensive, and debilitating clinical issues in psychology that we face. And social anxiety specifically is not too far behind it. So knowing that if you're listening to this podcast and you have yourself dealt with some of those things, that it is fairly common and that a number of other individuals have also dealt with and are dealing with it. So, were you when you're going through this process, and it sounds like you were able to sort of come to some ideas and some epiphanies that led you to seek methods of bettering your condition or your situation. Did you do that all your own? Like, what resources, what tools did you use to?
So there was definitely some professional help. I saw, at this point I've probably seen like 2 or 3 different counselors.
Okay.
I've also seen some psychiatrists and been put on some like antidepressants and anxiety, and they were hit and miss. Some worked, some didn't.
Right.
And then also just having, good friends and good people around me to kind of support me. It definitely wasn't just me by myself. I know some people looking at their situation might feel like they are completely alone. And I promise people care more than you think, and I promise there are resources out to you, and I absolutely promise that it is a journey that is hard, but it's a journey that you can overcome.
Yeah.
Just think of it as a skill. If you're scared of something, build the skill of being brave to it. Get outside your comfort zone regularly, and it will happen. And that was definitely some things that I used, and it was awesome.
Yeah, and that's huge because a lot of the time we'll hear those victory stories, of like big name celebrities, athletes, like overcoming great fears, overcoming even in some cases, mental health issues. But not often is highlighted the resources that they used, the support systems, the people in their lives, the therapists, and even in some cases you had mentioned psychotropic medication, like anti-anxiety, right? That these are all it's like a multi-pronged attack that it sounds like over years has been successful for you. And would you encourage other individuals to seek out these options as well as ways of getting through whatever they're going through?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have one life, and if you're not making it better, nobody else will. And not to give the tough love kind of talk here, but if you want to make changes in your life, you have to go for it. And sometimes you're going to need to recruit some other people and some other resources and some help. And man, there's books out there, there's people out there, there's friends that care, there's parents that care, there's family members that care, there's medication you can try. And it is a daunting task. I will not say it's not, but it is something you can do. It absolutely is something you can do.
And I'm thinking as well that we've been talking a little bit about anxiety from like the clinical perspective as like a symptom of maybe something more disordered, but that the same premise is kind of important if you are on the other side, if you're on the positive psychology side, if you're trying to better yourself, you still need those support systems. You still need mentors or coaches or people who are helping guide you through, because we're talking about like pushing your comfort zone, but if you just go out there and do a bunch of dumb stuff without purpose or intention, then you may be exposing yourself to things that make you fearful, but not in intentional ways that do make you better. So whether it's you feel like you're in the red and you're trying to get back to neutral, or you're feeling pretty positive and you were just trying to make yourself better, those resources still sound like they're important tools to leverage.
For sure. Definitely agree. Definitely agree.
Absolutely.
Well, on that note, I think we've touched on a lot of stuff here today.
Yeah.
I mean, some closing words. I'd say that fear can be proportionate or disproportionate, depending on your relationship with it and how practical you think that fear is.
Right.
And really, I think if we could leave you with one thing, it's that fear is a skill. You should have a healthy relationship with it. You should be pursuing it, but not going too far overboard. And it's as simple as, if you're scared of something, you can numb yourself to it, and you can become, I want to say numb, you can become in a healthier relation to it by dosing yourself with it, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you would like to add, Mr. Julian?
Yeah, I think that's really powerful, that forming that relationship with fear and it almost being a skill of how you dose yourself with fear as a way of aiding or increasing your own personal circle, your own comfort zone, and how you push that. And I think one thing that you had said earlier in the cast was doing something frequently, even if it's daily, even if it's little, to that you are afraid of or that makes you feel a little anxious.
Yeah.
It's just kind of a part of your day, but knowing that pushing your comfort zone in one way or another may be helping you take things to the next level of fitness.
Yep. It's the fit thing to do, is to have a good relationship with fear.
Absolutely. Well, I have been Julian Frazier.
I have been Shea Perkins,
And this
question
has
mark.
Have I been?
Have I been?
And this has been Hustle and Thrive. We'll see you next time, Tribe.
Later, guys.